This episode is brought to you by Top Notch Cattle Company, raising high-quality registered red and gray Brahman cattle. Contact Baxter Whitworth at 903-649-9155 or at bbwtopnotchcattle@gmail.com. Alright, this is a hard truth, but I'm going to say it. It is extremely hard, if not impossible, to be profitable in the cattle industry if you do not create a budget and tell your dollars and cents how to work for you and your cattle operation. That's what we're going to learn about in this episode, and also how that budget can help you make sure that when you sell your cattle, you're actually being profitable while doing it. So I hope you enjoy this episode and learn something. Welcome to the Cattle Innovation Station podcast,
bringing you the innovative new ways of the cattle industry.
We're your hosts, Baxter Whitworth and Paul Hayes. Together, we're going to be interviewing leaders within the cattle industry.
Here on this podcast, our focus is honoring God and innovating the cattle industry. Get ready to listen, learn, and laugh as we help innovate the cattle industry.
Let's get innovating. Have you been looking for a place to buy top quality AI sire semen or collectible of your own? Well, look no further than Elgin Breeding Services. Located in Elgin, Texas, Elgin Breeding Service is not only one of the best breeding services in the business, but also has superior customer service. Contact them at ebsbull@elginbreedingservices.com or by phone at 512-285-2019. Again, that's 512-285-2019. And visit their website at elginbreedingservice.com. It's time for another episode of the Cattle Innovation Station podcast, where we keep you current on beef cattle industry events, help you innovate your herd to turn a profit, and help innovate the beef cattle industry so we can feed more people on less land. I'm your host, Baxter Whitworth, and today I'm joined by Mr. Colton Thigpen as our guest today. Mr. Thigpen, how are you today?
I'm doing outstanding, bud. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for our interview today. This is a topic I've wanted to talk about for a while. So today we are going to be talking about budgeting as well as how to price cattle. And I'm really excited to talk about budgeting because we say we have two goals in our intro that I just said a second ago, which is to help innovate our herd to feed for a profit and help feed more people on less land. And so I think that first one of having a profit is very important to the second one, because if we're not being profitable, then there's not going to be any operations left to feed more people. And so I'm excited to talk about budgeting today. And I know when it comes to your cattle operation, you've learned to do that. Could you kind of talk about how you've learned to do that and what caused you to find the need to learn that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's as you know, it's kind of where my heart is right now. And I learned it because I've never been somebody that was driven by the dollar or driven by money. And so I grew up, I lived a lifestyle that was pretty frugal. And so I didn't overspend. I always kind of had, I didn't live outside of my means. And so I could make things work. However, that's a bad plan whenever you're trying to grow a business. And so for me, if I just I did it because I was passionate about it, right? We love it. We love the cattle industry, and that's why we're in it. And so I went into it chasing a passion, not chasing a business. And there was a lot of good that come out of that. because in turn I grew a brand, and that's what is hard for a lot of people, is to grow a brand. And so even though I wasn't profitable per se, I did a lot of good with what I was doing. But whenever I made the switch to become intentional with my finances and how I stewarded my finances as well as my cattle, that's when my business truly became a business.
So you said you had grew a brand and then you switched to the goal of being profitable. Do you think it's still possible to grow your brand simultaneously while being profitable?
It's probably the smartest way to do it. Yeah. Um, that's the way I would recommend doing it. So I sure hope that it's possible.
That's right. Well, so we've talked about why you switched your mindset, but what what is a budget when it pertains to a cattle operation? You know, we most people might have a budget that they follow each month or something for themselves, but when it pertains to a cattle operation, what is a budget and what does it look like?
So me, and I think a lot of us cattlemen are guilty of it. My deal was making enough money to keep going and do it again. But it was not making enough money to impact my home life and my family life and be part of that budget. And so whenever you get married and start having kids and a lot of responsibility in that field, your wife will say, "Hey, bud, how about all this time that you're spending on these cows and all this money that you're selling them for? We see it a little bit on our end and make it worthwhile." So that's one of the big reasons why I had to start being intentional about it. Um, and it was very hard to sit down and do a black and white budget because it's not fun for me, I know, and for a lot of us outdoorsy cattle people, it's not fun to sit inside and do the paperwork. But if you can put your operation and your plan in black and white, it will help you stay focused and execute so much better. And so it's a very broad subject on budgeting for a ranch. And so you have to decide what all it is going to entail and what you want your calf crop to actually pay for. So, like, for example, if you own a ranch or you purchased a ranch, is it paid for free and clear, or do you still have payments on it? And you have taxes on it, and you have some type of insurance. Is your calf crop going to pay all those things? And if so, that needs to be in your budget along with the feed. And what about your vehicle? Is that something that you're going to have and it's going to be in your personal budget? Or is the insurance and the fuel and the truck payment, is that going to be covered by your calf sales or whatever your cattle sales? Are they going to be covering that in your budget? And so once you decide what all you want it to pay for, then you can actually create your budget. But until you know that, it's going to be very hard. So if you're in the middle of trying to get this business plan and you already have your operation started, just know that you're not alone. And that's the position most people are in. And so what I did personally that helped me was, instead of just throwing it all at the business at once, I did small things that I wasn't yet doing. So I did things like, okay, the business is always going to pay for fuel from now on. That'll also help on taxes. It'll also pay um, the car payment, the truck payment. And so I designated certain things that I knew were going, that I wanted the business to pay for, in addition to the things it already did, like paying for itself with feed and hay and medicine and things like that. And so it's okay to gradually do your business plan, or you can look at it, try to throw everything at it and look at and say, man, I'm not in a position that my business can cover paying for all these things. So then weed certain things out and build a plan to be able to make enough to put all those things back in.
So I'm assuming you have your business set up as an LLC.
Yes and no. So my cattle business is set up as its own entity, just as a DBA.
Okay.
And then like Bull Nanza's LLC, Express Livestock Genomics is a LLC. For me, there wasn't as much benefit to set up the cattle business as a LLC.
EP Cattle Company. Owned by Eddie Wilson, EP Cattle Company is home of Sir Rouse Handshake. Rouse Handshake is a sound-structured, heavy-muscle bull that is really bold-ribbed. So it comes with no surprise that he is a Fort Worth and San Antonio Junior Show Division Champion and Rio Grande Valley Open Show Division Champion. He is a grandson of BRC Noble and JDH Shank Manso, and is also a great-grandson of Mr. H. Elijah Manso. You can contact Eddie Wilson or Nicole Wilson on Facebook at EP Cattle Company. So remember, if you're looking for some well-performing, registered Brahman genetics, contact Eddie Wilson on Facebook.
Infinity Cattle Services, owned by Chris Shivers, is glad to be a sponsor of the Cattle Innovation Station podcast. Infinity Cattle Services, a unique, vision-driven, service-oriented company committed to developing successful revenue-producing cattle operations, is a full-service consulting and marketing firm specializing in Brahman and Brahman-influenced cattle. Contact them today to learn more about how they can assist you with locating cattle, cattle mating, sale management, marketing, communications, record keeping, data submission, and a wide array of other services. They can be reached at 713-202-1747. Again, that's 713-202-1747, or at infinitycattleservices@gmail.com. That is infinitycattleservices@gmail.com. Visit their website at infinitycattle.com or check them out on Facebook and Instagram. Right. So you talked about putting some, once you have the margin, putting some items like fuel under your cattle operation for taxes. Can you talk about that a little bit more for just a second?
Sure. So one, it did two things for me whenever I did that. It put another expense on the cattle business, and at the end of the year, all those expenses, the mileage that you put on your ranch vehicle, the fuel that goes into it, any repairs to it, if you pay through the business, then you can write it off through the business. And where before I was paying, when I didn't know about the whole taxes and stuff and how it worked, I was paying for that stuff out of my personal account that was joint with Sarah and I. And in that account, that was like our jobs were paying for that. And so we didn't get a tax benefit if that's where the expenses came from. But when it's a ranch benefit and you pay for it from the ranch expenses, you can write it off and get your tax benefits there.
Right, and I think that's a great tool, because any income that you can keep to use as however needed is a great way, and sending it to Uncle Sam's not always the way we want to spend it. So going back to the budget though, how niche do you get with the line items in the budget? How much do you plan out, or are you more of a category? This goes to a certain area and this goes to a certain area. Are you very much a line item for each object?
What do you mean by line item?
In a budget where you're deciding where to spend the money,
Yeah.
each object of
Yeah.
the budget being
So
the
you're
line
talking
item.
about, are my categories like divvied up, or do I just do a general category? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Right. Are they very specific or
Yeah.
are they very generic, your categories?
Yeah, I've done it both ways. It's whatever kind of I have time for whenever I'm sitting down and building my budget. Um, the way that I'm wired, if you if I account for every dollar and I can't go outside of the lines in any way and everything has its place, like that gives me more anxiety than not having a budget at all. I would rather, hey, it's going to be about this. And if I need more, then I'll go work for extra more. I'd rather not have that extra stress on me. But I do like, and whenever you get to the point where you are doing your taxes and you're turning in stuff to your accountant, that's a great time to do a budget because you have to categorize everything and have those line items and see what you did. And it's a great time to be able to take those exact same expenses from the year before, the exact same categories they went in, exactly how they went. Maybe your accountant can give you some pointers and tips on how you could have done better or spent better, and you can make a plan for the next year at that time. And so that way you're not sitting down and just doing all this brain work all the time. You're kind of in the same mode and know where everything just went, and now you can plan to see where it can go.
Right. And so you talked about at tax time making a budget for the next year after you've seen kind of the profit and losses over the last year. And so do you
Yes.
make, and I've seen people with different opinions and what works for them. So I'm curious what works for you. Do you just make one budget for the entire year, or do you make a budget for each month or a budget for each quarter, or how do you like to do that?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great question. And part of what you have to know whenever you're doing a budget for a cattle operation is not all of them are fixed. Not all your costs are fixed. Actually, very few of them are. So you could have a year where we had a lot of rain, and so you didn't have to buy hay, or a year with no rain and you have to buy all your hay, and hay's expensive because nobody got rain. Cattle markets up, cattle markets down, feed markets up, feed markets down. There's so many factors that are variable. And so it's probably smart to do quarterly. I kind of focus more on seasonal. That's what helps me. Just my brain is okay. Um, when the cows are bred, what's my plan of action? When calving starts, what's my plan of action? When weaning starts, what's my plan of action? And that kind of helps just my brain and everything. It works best for me doing it that way because you have different, I manage the cattle different during those times. And so since I manage them differently during those times, I have different expenses during those times.
Right. And so how do you prepare for those different those different variables of how, even though sometimes you can kind of, like you said, plan out for the season, which is
Yeah.
obviously less a shorter time period than a year. How do you plan for variables that may pop up where you may end up creating extra margin because prices went down on an input, or you might end up losing some margin because prices went up on a certain input?
So I had a old cattleman tell me you need to budget for 25% of who knows what the heck this is going to be needed for. And I'm thinking, golly, I can't even budget in 2.5% extra, much less 25%. But I'm here to tell you, like, he was pretty spot on. I mean, from one you think's going to sell for high dollar dying, or some sickness coming through, or the drought thing, or feed prices, that 20 to 25% buffer, if you give yourself that, it'll almost always keep you out of a jam.
Okay, so within a month, do you kind of set aside maybe like a sinking fund where if it does go for this month and you use it, well, I needed it. If it doesn't, then I just roll it over to the next month or I find a use for it. How do you budget in that extra 25%?
Yeah. So what I do is, and I guess to better answer your question, I start at a year and then I break it up after that. And I never go monthly just because the way my business is set up, 80% of my sales are going to come one time a year. And so what I do is I create my entire budget off of that 80%. And so it if you notice, automatically I'm not accounting for the 20. So 80% of my sales I create my budget off of. Any sales outside of that calf crop, that main calf crop, is that buffer or gravy on top. And so if I look at, okay, I'm going to have 50 calves this year, and I think I could average X on these 50 calves. So I have a projected revenue. Then I look at, okay, what's it going to cost me to get them to this point? And start breaking all that down. And if I can make those numbers work for my whole year operation to get to that point on sale day, and I can make that work, then I know that I'm good, because in all actuality, I have a smaller calf crop at a different time of year that I counted for their expenses, but not for their income. I have semen sales coming in. I counted for their expenses, but not for that income in my budget. And so anything that those other streams of income that make up my 20%, they it that's extra on top of what I've already budgeted. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. So
have you been looking for Brahman cattle with a good genetic background? Contact 79 Cattle Company, selling reliable Brahman replacement heifers, Brahman show prospects, and Brahman bulls. Contact Taylor Tate at 210-241-4511. Again, that's 210-241-4511. Or contact Mallory Tate at 210-861-0155, 210-861-0155. If you truly want your livestock to perform at their best, make sure to contact Vance Aaron, the owner and operator of AFL Livestock Solutions. Vance specializes in MagnaWave treatments that use pulsed electromagnetic fields, or PEMF, to relieve pain, swelling, and inflammation, caused to help your livestock feel their best. In addition to livestock, Vance can also help you feel better. His treatment works great on sore muscles and joints, along with other mobility issues. His treatments are FDA approved to treat migraines. Aaron Family Livestock Solutions has helped many exhibitors make it to the backdrop with their proven MagnaWave treatments. Don't miss your next backdrop picture. Give Vance a call at 903-720-3184. Again, that's 903-720-3184. Or find them on Facebook at AFL Livestock Solutions.
that brings me to another question, and we'll get to diversifying incomes in another episode, but when it comes to, you said I project that my calves are going to bring this much. How do you prepare for something that you don't necessarily know? Because, I mean, those cattle, your cattle are going in a sale. Sometimes, you know, sometimes the people listening might be doing private treaty. Sometimes they might be taking them to a sale barn. So how do you project what the calves will bring in, and how do you budget accordingly?
Yeah.
And I guess the question that also goes along with that is, do you budget pre the sale, as in like the year leading up to the sale, or do you budget the year leading after the sale?
So whether you're taking calves to the sale barn, whether you're consigning them to a sale, or whether you're selling private treaty, unless you're just starting, you're going to have some type of track record, right? So I can look at what my cattle sold for last year on average. I can compare that market to the market we're currently in. I can compare that quality of stock that I sold that year to the quality that I have now. Then I can look at, okay, what's my worst case scenario that they're going to sell for? And what's my best case scenario that they're going to sell for? I meet in the middle, and then I take off 10% because maybe two die. And that's how I do it.
Okay, I like that. And so, do you necessarily create a profit loss statement, or do you just look at what they brought and do you factor in the input with that as well, or do you just look solely at what the income was?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it probably mostly depends on what I'm selling. So if I put together a group of stocker calves that I bought at one price and was selling at another, and that whole deal was going to be done, then I would know all my inputs before I sold them, then ensure that I sell them for more, right? And try to maximize that. But in the cow calf deal, I don't, or the show steer deal, or there's some other deals where you don't have as many options. It is what it is on the selling. You do the best you can, and then what it comes out to be. Then I've created my budget for past that, right? If I can think I know what I'm gonna sell for, and I have my total revenue, then I create my budget for past that. And if it goes higher or lower off of what I thought, then that affects my budget. But I don't really, my budget, everything that I budgeted before sale day came from this time the year before. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Okay. So, do you sell all your cattle in a live sale, or do you sell some of them private treaty?
So last year I sold every one of them private treaty.
Okay.
This year in that main group that I'm doing, I'm selling every one of them private treaty. In my off group, I went back to online and did that deal a little bit.
Okay, so with private treaty, and this kind of plays into sale also, just having a minimum, but with private treaty, can you talk about how you price those cattle from a standpoint of quality, but also of how you know what those animals cost to get them there? And also, do you budget, or not budget, but do you track those expenses to see what it costs to get them there as a group, or can you see each individual animal what it costs to get them to that point?
Yeah. So the way I do it is I'd get my projected total revenue, my projected total expenses, and get my break even. That's a word that I've insinuated but haven't said. Finding out your break even, that's the whole thing on budgeting, right?
Right.
And I want to know ideally what I want my cattle to average. And I'm not like saying, oh, they need to go way out here and it's going to be some impossible number. But if I think my cattle if they could average this, I'd count it a success. Then I start going through and don't even look at those numbers anymore. And I go through the individual cattle and I say, I think I could sell this one for this one for this, this one for this, this one for this.
And that's based off quality, right? Or is that?
That's based off quality.
Okay.
And I'll add those up and see if I reached and average them together and see if I reached my goal. And if I did, then I roll with it. If I didn't, then I see where I need to adjust it. If I need to be better somewhere, or if I have room to negotiate. So that way, whenever you come over to buy one, I know how much I can or can't negotiate. And if I come down on this one, do I have another one that I can sell for more?
Right. Okay.
And here's something that may be controversial and people don't talk about, but it's 100% the truth. Whenever you sell private treaty, especially if you're not selling a commercial animal, if you're selling like a show animal or a premium animal, a lot of times you're pricing the situation and the family more than you're pricing the animal. And that is a hard truth, and that's one that people don't want to believe, but it is a fact. So here's what I mean by that. Say I have a calf that without factoring in anything about a family, I say, okay, he could bring $5,000. Okay.
Okay.
And then a family shows up and the dad is saying, man, this show deal is expensive and it's crazy, but he said, I can use it as a write-off in my business and I'm out here to get a good one and da-da-da-da. And you just sit back and you listen to these things, and then he has to spend a certain number for it to make a difference in that, and that he's got a certain number in mind of what a good one costs. And he falls in love with this one. It's not necessarily a good deal if he buys them at a cheap price. If $10,000 is what he thinks a good one costs, and $10,000 helps him for whatever scenario he's got going on, then I'm going to say this one costs 10. Okay, good deal. And people think I have a $5,000 calf, I have a 10. No, I have a $5,000 situation, a $10,000 situation, a $15,000 situation. Because then the next guy comes in and he says, I am absolutely all in at $5,000. I've saved for 2 years. This is the absolute most I can spend on one, but I'm willing to do it to give my girl a chance. And I know that some of these things sell for $10,000 and $15,000 and $20,000, but I love that tag 8 over there. Well, sir, I think I can sell that one to you for $5,000 because I've made money on this other one. Now I can adjust, and I have a $5,000 situation right here for this calf. And so really, truly, people say, oh, that calf is 5,000. No, it's whatever somebody's going to pay for him, right? If I take him to the sale barn, he's worth 500. So really, truly, that's a $500 calf, and you're making up a number. So the calf has to be quality, but it fits a situation a whole lot more when you're selling private treaty show animals than it does just like the market.
That's a whole lot to unpack. So I think that's where it goes back to the beginning of the episode where you talked about how you only started making a budget because you had to be profitable, and it wasn't really that you cared about the money. And I think that comes back in right there, where as long as you're making a profit, you're as long as you're making a profit, you're okay with it baselining there.
But it's very important, though, where I know I'm going to make money at, right? So I can't negotiate the price on a calf if I don't know where my break even is.
Right.
Because then I'm just throwing numbers out in the wind.
And that's a very important piece also, because I think obviously you have to price a calf. Quality plays a huge role into that, but you can't undersell yourself on something that's cost you a lot of money to put in. And you also can't obviously you would want to sell it for as much as possible, but you need to know your break even. And so with that, how do you know when sometimes it might be time to cut cut your losses? If you have a calf that just does not turn out as good as you thought it was, and how do you find the best way, even if you might lose money, how do you find the way to not lose as much as you might have?
Yeah. That's $1 million question. So I believe the easiest thing to sell is a truly good one. The hardest thing to sell is an average one when you're trying to get it for a premium. And the thing you better be quick on is getting rid of the bad ones. Because those bad ones, one, it's bad advertising. Two, so they're going to hurt you in the long run there the more people see them. Two, they cost just as much as as a good one to raise up and make look right. And so I get them out of there as soon as possible. Now, what is getting out of there for me? I send them to the sale. And this year it's very easy because they're selling good at the sale, at the
Right.
sale barn, right? And so it's good to get them gone. But whenever they're not, it's very handy if you have, you can send them to a feed yard and retain ownership, and they can feed them for $3 and something cents a day probably, and you can weigh your options there. If you have a wheat pasture and it's in the winter, you can send them to the wheat pasture and they can get some more gain that's kind of for free, right? But for me, a lot of times I just cut my losses and roll them suckers and pretend they died and I got a check for it.
Are you looking for high quality hay that is priced well? Then make sure to visit Threadgill Hay Company. They have fertilized horse jigs and Tifton 85. They carry square bales and round bales. Their square bales are $8 a bale, and their 4x6 round bales are $50 per roll. That's a nice price and good quality. They're located outside of Mount Enterprise, Texas, and they will gladly give you more details when you contact them. Speaking of contacting them, you can reach out by texting Sawyer Poole at 903-646-4741 or Ronald Threadgill at 903-235-2011. Got you. Okay, so one last question before we wrap this episode up, and going back to how you talked about pricing, and you talked about the way you talked about it was kind of from a show aspect, but for a seed stock producer that, maybe they sell to some juniors, and maybe they sell to some other ranches that might show, but I mean that's not their focus. How do you suggest they do pricing? And I know that's not your focus as an individual, but from what you know, what would you say?
But it's going to be the same deal for anything that's a premium over commodity market value at a sale barn. Anything that's over premium, that's a premium over that commodity value on what they would bring at the sale that day, is totally dependent on the situation, your salesmanship, and the quality of the stock. Because you could have a guy come in and you're wanting to sell him a group of 5 registered Brangus heifers. Okay. Well, is this guy going to put a Charolais bull on them and have commercial calves? Is this guy trying to have a foundation of furthering his purebred herd? Is this guy going to put them on a cargo ship and send them to South Africa? Is this guy going to put them with a Angus bull and create ultra blacks and then breed up? And so the same heifers can go to so many different situations, and those guys have a different price point. So if I'm selling to that commercial guy, he can't afford to pay much of a premium. He wants some good stock, but he's selling them by the pound. So he can't afford much of a premium. But if a guy is wanting to further his purebred Brangus herd and thinks that your genetics can do it, then price your genetics at a premium. But they have to be good enough to back up how you price them, right?
Right.
So they may be $2,500 to one guy. They may be $5,000 to another guy.
creating repeat customers. Well,
Yeah.
what you going back to backing up
But
the
you have to know each of those markets as well. Because if you don't know each of those markets, then if you tell that commercial guy, yeah, these are good Brangus heifers, top of the line, and they're $7,000 a piece, he's gonna be like, huh, cool story, bro. I'm gonna go down the road to somebody else. And if you need 7,000 for them, then you can't sell them to him anyway.
Well, I hope now you not only know how to better price your cattle for your operation, but also know how to use budgeting not only as a tool to help you price your cattle, but as the foundation to make your cattle operation more profitable. If you learned something from this episode, please consider sharing this episode with somebody else you know so that they can gain the knowledge you have as well. Also, follow this podcast, and until next time, keep innovating the cattle industry. Signing off.